Imagine this, an ancient empire with deep roots in the sands of the desert, in the desolate mountains, and in the vast plains of Western Asia. An empire that for centuries was known as Persia, dominating and being dominated, fighting and conquering, shaping history in ways that few could understand. But in an act of apparent abandonment, this empire transformed, not just in name, but in identity. In 1935, the world learned Persia would become Iran. What happened? And why did such a grand civilization have to change its name? And with it, its destiny. Today, you will uncover the dark secrets behind this transformation and what it really meant for the world. Persia. When you hear that name, you probably think of glorious empires, ancient cultures, and a history filled with wealth, traders, and immortal warriors. But at the heart of this ancient empire, there was always a paradox. Persia's grandeur, with its cultural dominance, was not enough to escape the external gaze, the invaders, and of course, the construction of a new identity. Before 1935, the name Persia was the global reference for the empire that spanned vast regions from Mesopotamia to the borders of India. But like all things vast, it was also a target for external narratives, often distorted and exoticized. But what is the true reason behind the change? What made the last Shah of Persia, Reza Shah Pahlavi, decide to change the name of his country to Iran, a change that would resonate for generations? The answer isn't only political. It's not just the desire to break away from the limitations of imperial history. It's about the search for a new identity, an attempt to shake off the remnants of a foreign narrative and forge a new future for a people who already carried centuries of glory and tragedy. By adopting the name Iran, which means land of the Aryans, the nation wasn't just changing a name, it was trying to rewrite its history. To understand this, we must go even further back in time. Imagine a people traveling into the desert, crossing mountains and valleys, bringing with them a unique language and culture. The Persian Empire, founded by figures such as Cyrus the Great, conquered vast lands, not only with military might, but with a vision that respected the religions and cultures of the conquered. Persia did not impose a single god, but allowed others to worship their own beliefs. It was an empire of grandeur and tolerance, but over time, Persia was invaded, fell, and the empire's grandeur began to fade. The entry of the Islamic Arabs in the 7th century was a fatal blow. The ancient religion of Zoroastrianism was slowly replaced by Islam, and the dominance of the Persian language was overshadowed by a new language, Arabic. For centuries, Persian identity merged, hid, and in many cases was subjugated. But contrary to what many believe, Persian culture never disappeared. It persisted, like a persistent flame beneath the ashes of history. Now we come to the 20th century, where history becomes even more interesting. The Persian Empire had disappeared, but its culture was alive, in folklore, in art, in literature. However, over the years, foreign powers and their own internal tensions were shaping the country in ways few could imagine. When Reza Shah Pahlavi ascended to power, he was determined to bring the country into a new era. He wanted more than just modernization. He wanted a national renaissance. So why the name change? For Reza Shah, the word Persia evoked a past of foreign domination, a representation tied to the Western view of the empire, a view he wanted to overcome. By adopting the name Iran, he was signaling to the world and his people that the nation was no longer just a legacy of ancient times. He was creating a new identity, one that celebrated the Aryan people of the region and set them apart from Western influence. The impact of this change was immediate and profound. For some, this change represented a break from the glorious past, an attempt to erase centuries of history. But for many Iranians, the new name brought a renewed sense of pride and power. They would no longer be known only through the lens of decadence and exotica. They would be Iran, a nation deeply rooted in history, but now looking toward the future. However, the name Iran did not disappear from Western perceptions as a simple solution. On the contrary, it brought new complications. By adopting a more nationalistic identity, Reza Shah was not just changing the name of a country, he was redefining Iran's relationship with the world, distancing it from the narrative of the exotic and distant, and placing it at the heart of geopolitics. Iran thus began to emerge not only as a regional nation, but as a power with its own legacy to defend. The transformation is not limited to a name change, but to what it represents. In a time of rising tension in the Middle East, Iran positioned itself as a nation on the rise, determined to rewrite the rules of the game. And so the name Iran, a name that emerged from ancient Persia, carries not only the weight of an ancient history, but the promises of a future that is far from written. And if you look at Iran today, you can still see the scars of that transformation. The country is no longer just ancient Persia. It is now a melting pot of culture, religion, and power. And the name change, so simple in execution, was perhaps the first step in this reconfiguration, which continues to reverberate throughout history to this day. So when you talk about Iran, remember, it's more than just a name change. It's a journey of power, culture, and resistance, a journey that began millennia ago in ancient Persia and still, today, continues to shape the fate of the Middle East. What you thought you knew about Iran's history, about Persia, may need to be reevaluated. What happened to Persia, in fact, is the story of a civilization that never disappeared but reinvented itself, and how all of this continues to define the course of world history.